As you know, the Meat Eater Live Tour is on April 23rd through May 5th. Chances are in a town near you. What you may not know is you can win tickets to each of these events just by going to a backcountry hunters and anglers pint night. There's going to be a pint night in each of these towns: San Diego, Salt Lake City, Tempe, Anaheim, Boise, Sacramento, Missoula, Portland, Tacoma, where you can compete in Meat Eater trivia and win not only tickets to the show, but a chance to be on stage with all of us. So get your butt to a pint night, and we'll see you on stage.
Hey, I'm Tyler.
I'm KC.
And you're listening to
the Frequent Element Podcast.
Frequent. What's going on my woods people? We are frequently, apparently, doing this thing called podcasting in the truck. In the truck. It's me and KC. That's it today. You don't get Eric and Greg and all that, man. You got to pay extra for that. We actually right now are on the way back from Arkansas. And and I can't tell you in particular, but I can tell you one place it's not, and that's Smoke City, Arkansas. That is not where we were at.
That's hilarious, dude.
Yeah, we had a great trip recently, and we spent some time. Maybe KC might have talked about this in the last podcast. We spent some time hanging out with our newfound friend Clay Newcomb, who we appreciate tremendously. There's a lot of Clay Newcomb fans in the world, and it's because he's a genuine dude.
Yeah,
you know,
he's a real deal, man.
He is.
Hey, we spent a bunch of time with Clay, and we had to work our tails off on this trip. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. But sadly, we didn't get to do an Element podcast with Clay. We wanted to, but there just is only so much time in the world. We did get to do the Rutfresh radio intro with Clay. So if you haven't heard that, that's the last episode of Rutfresh we did with Clay, so you can go hear kind of how that went and check that out as well. But we got to do a lot of hunting and a lot of hanging out with old Clay.
Yeah, we did, man. Got to, we got to share a really awesome experience, camp experience, because of one of our friends, old Scotty. Scott gave us the pretty much the keys to his house. He also was there for a lot of the days with us. It was kind of a long trip. And he was there a bunch with us, cooked for us. We didn't ask him to do none of this. He offered this up, in fact, and cooked for us. And let me just tell you, like you could go down and hang out some duck camps in Louisiana and get like you would figure there'd be some good cooks down there in Louisiana, right? Like Cajun country, food's a big part of the culture. Let me just tell you, Arkansas, this dude right here, Mr. Scott, can cook. There was some stuff. Frankly, I ate several things that I had never eaten before.
That was neat.
Yeah.
It's not often you get to eat things you haven't eaten.
I know. It's usually burgers and burritos.
Yeah, exactly. Some variety of chili powder is usually the way we roll. But that was different when Scott was around. It was yummy. There's this and Scott is like a Southern gentleman type, like good accent, man. Like, that's what I'm talking about. And there's this Southern hospitality side of things. Not anything against our Northern buddies, but like Southern hospitality is kind of a thing. Yeah. And Scott kind of taps into that real well. It's like hey, you're our guest, we're going to take care of you type deal. He has a servant heart, really appreciative of really the delicious food that we got to eat.
What was that thing that he cooked the ducks? What was that
He didn't have
called?
a name for it, but it pretty much was like duck Alfredo.
Well,
almost.
he had there's a chicken recipe that's more commonly known that is what he modeled it after.
Oh, that's right. It was
Marry Me Chicken. That's it. It had gummits.
Yeah.
Came to us at the same time.
That's right.
So he did that with ducks. Man, that was amazing. I mean, you want to talk about on a just day when you're just getting pounded by rain, I mean, that's just the final.
Warm the belly.
Yeah, warm the belly, go to bed just feeling full and saturated with just all kinds of good stuff.
4.5 hours of solid sleep. Man, it feels great.
Man. Get less when you go home.
Man, this trip, was surprisingly tiring.
Yeah.
I expected it to be difficult hunting, but it was surprisingly time-consuming and tiring. How many more T's can I use here?
I don't know.
Taxing.
It was taxing, man.
It was tremendous, tumultuous.
It was treacherous.
I don't want to say terrible. It was terrible.
At times treacherous.
Yeah, at times, yeah, for sure. So we'll talk about some of the tactics and things we were doing or whatever. But man, it really was like such an experience to go do just hunting different. You know,
Yeah.
like man, there's a culture around this stuff. You know, the house we stayed in was, I mean, it was by no means like fancy, right? It was a really old house, but very comfortable.
Built in almost 100 years ago. It was built in 24, I think.
Being
is what he said.
underwater.
Yeah.
You know, and then you go in there and they've done a little remodel stuff, but it's a hunting camp, you know, and it's what you'd call rough comfortable, I think. And you know, it's got bunks, but the neat thing is there are pictures on the wall from like years and years of bucks and outdoor adventures. You know, there's trout on the wall. It's just cool, man. You know, and
Scott's like generationally been in this area. I think his dad's kind of got him into hunting and fishing in this area a long time ago.
His dad was a commercial fisherman.
That's right. I forgot about that.
Yeah, and that's how we got introduced to buffalo ribs.
Yes.
Which is really neat.
Yeah, it is. It's a good way to use a fish that otherwise is not utilized pretty much, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
Not by fishing or like by sport fishing or by delicacy fishing.
If you're unfamiliar with this, there are two species of fish, smallmouth buffalo and bigmouth buffalo. They're sucker fish. They're a native sucker to North America, not like a carp. And they have a very oily white flesh that most would say is inedible. Inedible,
Yep.
not inedible. Yep. But apparently you can utilize the rib cage of these fish and eat it and fry it up, and it's really good. We had some.
And I didn't know that this was a thing, really, but until last year I started figuring this out. But in Arkansas, you can, like, we were eating fish from local rivers.
Yeah, it's very cool.
Just pick commercial fishermen going out and getting a few off trot lines or however they do it, and selling them to local restaurants.
Yeah, and like it's legit because they were like, no, that's not from the river, but this right here, like they knew which ones came from local sources, which was really cool, and just another part of that culture. You know, that was
It's
pretty
thick
neat.
with culture, man.
It
you know,
is.
because this is a thing too. I was talking about it last maybe 2 nights ago at dinner. Things haven't changed much in some of these areas, some of these parts of the country that we go to, and this is true of this area as well, where like people would sit there at a restaurant working, and they talked about very simplistic things and very like localized things.
Yeah,
you didn't really hear a whole bunch of political complaining or high level philosophy stuff. It was just like, you know, talking about, oh well, Sheila's been down there doing this, you know, or whatever. It's like very small world, and
in a good way.
In a good way, yeah. It's like, man, you know, to not concern yourself with all the things, man, and everything that you could concern yourself with globally has some sort of fear-mongering flair to it a lot of times, you know, and so
to go along with this too, to speak on something we don't talk too much about. That area down there is very racially integrated, and I appreciate that.
Yeah,
you know, people. It was just you are who you are to every person you talk to.
Right.
There weren't any lines drawn.
Yeah,
and I really like that.
They've been living together for a long time in close quarters, right? There's no. I was saying this. There's no. You know. For an example around us, you know, there's no like Highland Park versus Seagaville, or you know, like these. In a big city, people can segregate pretty effectively, you know, and it's not probably a good thing, you know. And these towns are small enough that everybody just kind of has to live together, and they have been for a long time. And so like it's very natural feeling. There's nothing forced there. It's not like hey, we're going to make a cultural movement to make people integrate.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
Yeah, and so I like that. Another thing about the people, all of them. dude, I met some of the most friendly people that I've ever met.
Oh, absolutely.
Just like, we were leaving and stopped in a convenience store to get gas and some snacks. And this was just like the cherry on top of the whole trip. But like 3 of us checked out, and the lady at the cashier called each one of us like honey or something like that. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like, and super nice. You want a bag? You know, like everybody was very outgoingly nice.
We ate at a
that,
restaurant,
you know, over the top.
And the owner of the restaurant comes in. It's kind of like still a small town thing. The owner of the restaurant, she comes in about 30 minutes before closing to kind of make sure the place closes up good. She's wrapping silverware. Where are y'all from at exactly? You know, and we tell her, you know, well, Northeast Texas, we got some people from all over the country here hanging out with us, though, and Clay's a native to Arkansas. And she said, oh, you know, them deer, they ought to be out there running right now with these cold temperatures. I ought to kick them in. You know, like, I don't know if this lady's ever deer hunted, but like she
kind of sounded like it.
Yeah, well, either way, she's
trying to help.
Knows the Southern culture and wants to help you. And, also kind of just give you a little confidence boost, you know, which is also a very good business move. Because it's like, let's do this thing. You should be hanging out here hunting more, so you come in here and eat some more. You know?
That's right, man.
Pretty cool, man.
It is. I don't know. The whole experience, we've talked about this several times, but, you know, as we started to wrap the last few days, man, we were so tired. I mean, it rained, you know, from pretty much day one till we didn't see the clouds till the last day. I mean, the sun till the last day.
Absolutely.
It was cloudy every single day. Mm-hmm. And basically coming to the last couple days there, we're starting to really just be tired. I mean, I can tell at this point now, like when I get super tired, you and me both slur our words real bad. Mm-hmm. We probably will on this podcast some. We got a little bit of rest last night, but you know, we were coming to the end, and I was like, man, you know what? This has been, despite not having the greatest deer hunting trip, this has been a fantastic, I had so much fun. And you made a good point that actually the funnest times we had were not in the deer woods on this trip, which is sometimes kind of new for us. And we don't have that happen a whole lot, because a lot of times we're camping in a tent, and the best moment is these deer running all over the place in the rut, you know, because everything else kind of stinks. But for this hunt, with the camp, Scott cooking for us, the friendship that we had with Scott and Clay and each other, except for Michael and Eric, they're not super friendly together. But they're, you know, it was just so good, man, and that the everything was comfortable outside of just being out in the rain and stuff and hunting through all the mud. And everything getting covered in mud and just getting up early. We're traveling pretty far to hunt stuff and trying new places. But, you know, it was just the culture, the people, namely the ones we were spending a lot of time with, made this trip really nice, man.
And in particular, you know, our company there, we got a good group of guys, you know, with our core group here at the Element. But Clay and Scott are both like extremely talented storytellers and conversationalists. So like it was always good talk. I've talked about this sometimes with friends and stuff. Like I'm not a big fan of small talk. I'll do it. You know, I'm not a person who just like refuses to have small talk, but like I like to like have conversations that kind of promote growth, I guess you'd say. I don't really know, you know, or at least talk about something interesting, you know, like, oh, what do you do? Well, what do you mean what I do? You know, like, But anyways, Scott and Clay they're really into talking about cool stuff and telling stories and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
you know?
knowledgeable dudes. You know, got a lot of different. Scott is like one of the world's most interesting men.
He's done a lot of stuff.
He's done a lot of things, but you know, it was a lot of fun. The culture was there, man. That just tingled some weird things.
What happened?
Eric just touched my hand back here on the deal, and I was just like, I had a weird tinge in like my hamstring. You know, it was kind of weird. Anyway, so outside of that, though, the logistics of this trip were intense.
They were.
And let's kind of break into that a little bit.
Okay,
you know?
So we have got the buck truck. As y'all all know, this hunt will be on the buck truck series next year.
On the Meat Eater YouTube channel.
On the Meat Eater
as far as we know.
Channel. Yep. And what's going to happen within the buck truck is we use a lot of different types of access and a lot of creative ways to hunt whitetail deer. And on this trip, the buck boat is a part of the access. What's so funny?
No, me and Eric are just laughing.
Y'all are just being silly. The buck boat is really the thing that complicated things. It actually helped so much to be able to run the boat around on the water and go try to find deer.
Yeah.
But getting everyone deployed in a timely manner in the morning and being on the road and driving to the boat ramp and all that just was complicated.
Lots of moving parts, man.
A lot of moving parts. And you have to coordinate 3 guys as to where they're going to go and like make it work to where every person can be dropped off on the same area and pickups and the pickup and all that kind of stuff. Like there's a lot of moving parts. And each guy has a camera guy with him too, you know. So we got Greg, Michael, and Eric who are all also have to be coordinated. Mm-hmm. Michael, poor little guy, can't keep up with his stuff. Has to have people rescue him at the boat ramp.
Yep, he does.
He does. So, you know, it's just a lot going on, man.
It is. There's so much involved. The camera gear, the batteries, and then you add rain into the mix, and it slows everything down, right? I mean, Michael's got to find a Walmart sack. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and you got to also, like, understand the weather, when it's going to hit, and when you got to be out of the woods or when you can go to the woods when you don't have service.
Yeah.
The cell phone service. You know, cell phones, man, I love them, I hate them. They really help you in hunting quite a bit with some things, particularly weather. Like, it's nice to have up to the minute, like, hey, what's going on here? Hey, we need to take cover. Hey, we need to, you know, get off the water, that sort of stuff.
Hey, can you meet me over here?
Yes, exactly. Hey, man, let's make a little adjustment as to where you're going to pick me up at what time. Like, all that kind of stuff gets a little bit difficult.
You know, we can we didn't talk about this later on, but the day that you picked me up from the boat, but I didn't get dropped off in the boat that was a fun planning session.
Yeah, we should tell that story in a bit in greater detail. Mm-hmm. So the boat was a great tool of access, and I would encourage people, if you live in an area where it is practical to use a boat, to do it. Even when it's impractical, if you can be pretty particular and maybe not overinvest in something that you don't really need, but like, you know, a tiny kayak or something like that gets you across the creek is a big deal. You're laughing because we've done a real tiny kayak before. We had a 9-foot sit on top. I mean, this thing was hardly a surfboard.
Dude.
And we used to go across this little creek. We'd walk like a mile back in on public land, go across this creek and hunt. And we didn't even have a paddle for the thing, I don't think.
We picked up a stick every time.
Picked up a stick, and we had a string attached to it, and you couldn't carry your gear across with you. So you had to get across, and then we would push the kayak across the creek attached to a string.
I forgot about that part of it.
And so it was like you're playing shuffleboard.
Yeah, and it would, sometimes if you didn't push it right, it would spin. Just sit in the middle of the creek and spin.
Exactly right.
And so then you got to pull it back, and since it's spinning, like your paracord gets caught on your stand. You're like, if I pull too hard, this thing's going in the bottom.
The bow is going to the bottom of the water. Somebody's going swimming.
We had that
and we actually never had an accident.
Nope, we didn't.
And we did that
the first time I got in, though, like I had my light real dim, and you know the boat's constantly just rocking a little bit, and I felt like I was going to fall so bad. Yeah. And then in the daylight, when I had a perspective of what was around me, I was like, "Oh, I'm moving, but I'm super stable." Yeah. But you don't realize it in the dark. And I was like, it took me forever to get across there because I was like barely even moving my paddle stick, you know, because I didn't want to tip over.
Well. The stability was much better on this trip. I actually inherited a boat from my granddad. My granddad is a great fella. He is suffering from dementia pretty difficultly these days, and diabetes. So he's off the water, and wanted me to take this boat and continue on the legacy, which is cool. This boat's caught. There's been more fish boated in this boat than I ever have a chance to possibly boat. Mm-hmm. I've grown up in this boat since I was about 7. He had an old Kingfisher before then. You remember Kingfishers?
Yep.
They're like tri-hole looking deal. And this is just a big old aluminum flat bottom. And so it felt pretty cool to get this thing out into the water. But it's huge. All right? It's a 19-foot boat, 72 inches wide. Like, just you can put a four-wheeler in this boat. Literally, you can. You can't have a lot of dudes or gear in there, but one guy in a four-wheeler can go in this boat. So it's great for hunting out of. There's plenty of room for gear and guys. And it's still very stable and safe when there's that much in there. So it was really pretty enjoyable to cruise the river in that boat. Now, we did learn some things that we need to make a couple alterations to the boat. First of all, got to fix a leak. Because before my granddad was suffering from medical conditions, he still had this condition called hard-headedness, where he'd just run up on stumps and stuff, and, you know, like, he kind of hard on stuff, which might be where I get it. Kind of hard on things, too. But the boat, like, has got some cracks in it and stuff, so it leaks a little bit. But you can spend all day on the water in it pretty much and not be unsafe. The other thing is we had some foggy business going on.
That was not fun.
Yeah, not fun at all. And so I think you might need to mount a bow-mounted light on this thing.
Brighter lights one way or another, whether it's spotlights or... We'd like to mount something there. If you have an idea, if you are a guy with a big old LED, you know, light bar that you use on a boat, send us a message on Instagram or something.
Man, hunting boats are cool. I know that duck boats, I'd like to see people's duck boats too, because we saw a lot of cool ones on this trip. But I'd like to see people's whitetail hunting. But like, if you've got some mods or something you've done for how to carry bows, like, man, things can get mud stomped in a boat real quick, and that's sketchy because even in the most stable of boats like this one is, there's times when there's acceleration or deacceleration, and if you don't have your sea legs, great, you do this like little jumpy thing, and you don't really have any control where your foot lands. So we didn't destroy any gear on this trip, but we could have. And so, like, it would be great to stow the important things in certain places. That way, you know, they're safer. But the boat was fun. We kind of employed this strategy a few times. You know, the thing you would think about normally would be we all pull up and we disperse from there. And that worked to a certain extent. But we also did a deal where we kind of hopscotched. So I would drop off a guy in one place, go upriver, drop off another guy in another place, and then go upriver again and drop a guy off there. And I really liked that because we were kind of all three in completely different places. And we ended up feeling like we were covering some country. Now, the inverse of that, first off, let me say, duck hunters are awesome. I am not too much of a duck hunter. I don't mind shooting a duck, but I wouldn't call myself a duck hunter. When you're trying to whitetail hunt and there's duck hunters everywhere, it makes it kind of tough. So one of the things we struggled with on this trip was getting away from human pressure. I wouldn't say it's hunting pressure, but there's just a bunch of people out there. And so that's bumping deer around a little bit. So we're in pursuit of areas that have a little bit less of that. We're kind of working around the duck guys.
Early in the trip, we had pretty much like the second day of the trip was opening day after the split, basically.
Which is like the second biggest holiday around out there after the original opening.
There was people everywhere.
Oh, yeah. Dudes going everywhere. They love their boats and their boomsticks and all that, you know. But I can remember kind of the first time we thought we found a place that was going to be away from some pressure. We all pulled the boat up and dispersed from there. We all three had like Onyx dots that we were going to head to. And it's real neat, actually, on Onyx these days. You can share like a bunch of pins at once. So I had map scouted all this and found a bunch of different pinch points and stuff like that I liked. And I was sharing like 10 pins with Tyler and Clay at the same time. And then we had established like which three we were going to head to that all worked right on the right wind directions. And we all kind of take off on our merry little way. And Greg and I are walking to ours. We're not seeing really great sign. We're kind of down it a little bit. And we're just about to cross this low spot. And I look up. And yonder is one Tyler Jones headed my way through the woods. How did we end up in the same place, Tyler?
Well, so I guess my whole thought process involved around this trip was a couple of things. And I try to fill this role a little bit a lot of times, but especially on this trip, with this being your boat, I wanted you to be able to go where you wanted to go. And so I thought I will fit in and find something everywhere we go. And so that's what I was doing. And in this case, I told Clay to go ahead and pick his spot too. And so you picked what I would have picked as well. A great.
It's funny how we work
pinch.
that way. A GLP.
Yeah, a great looking pinch.
We both tend to and this has developed as we have hunted together more and more and become better friends. But we have a very similar hunting style nowadays. We see the same things in places, and it is warranted too. Mm-hmm. So continue.
So with that, I thought, okay, well, there's plenty of country down here and different things to hunt, swamps and all kinds of stuff. I mean, this stuff's nasty. Well, Clay picked another good spot, I thought, and then that left me with a spot that I thought was pretty good too. And so we get off, we find out immediately there is a four-wheeler trail right on the bank. Like as soon as you come up the cut bank, there's a four-wheeler trail, and it's being used. And we're like, dadgummit. So y'all take off. Well, I take off, and I realize within about 200 yards that there's almost a guarantee that this four-wheeler trail is going to go where I am going, because there's a kind of ridge system. When I say ridge, we're talking a difference in a few feet.
Southern ridge.
A southern ridge system where I'm going. Well, most of them four-wheeler trails are built out of the swamp, right? Mm-hmm. They're built on the ridges. So I just know that this thing is, I mean, I'm going 3/4 of a mile, but I can tell you right off the bat, this thing is going to go where I'm going. So with that, I follow it for another probably 200 yards, me and Eric do. And I was like, okay, I'm not doing this. I'm not going to walk another 6/10 just to get in there and be, in the middle of four-wheeler dude country. When it had fresh tracks on it, like fresh four-wheeler tracks. I was like, there's probably even a dude in there. And anyway, I peel off, and I'm like, I'm just going to go straight down this thing and try to hunt somewhere down the edge of the swamp. And if I can't find anything I like, KC's down there, and I'm going to meet up with him. We're going to talk about it. We're a ways from each other. So I head down this swamp. Everything's pretty open. I don't like it. It's, basically a lake. And I get down to KC, and I'm like, man. And he's talking with Greg, trying to figure out their spot. And, I mean, we've walked like over a mile at this point probably to get to y'all. And I was just like, man, I don't love it. And you're like, yeah, I hadn't loved it yet either. And so then we start to talk.
So I look up and see you fellas. And at first I'm like, what are they doing? And I was a little disappointed.
Really?
Yeah, I was. Because
Why?
We were like, had got to my pen, and I was like, why are they here? Because I was like, oh, well, this evening's ruined. But quickly thereafter, I was like, you know what? This is going to be cool. We're going to hunt together. It's going to be fun. But like there was just the initial like disappointment of like, what happened? Did I send them the wrong pin? Did they end up going to the wrong one? But it was because you didn't feel good about what was going on up there, and we're going to try to rework the situation.
I mean, it literally was like, I would not have done that if I felt like I had any options.
Yeah.
But I didn't have anywhere to go. Like, if I headed the other direction, I was going to be in Dudeville.
Well, Tyler, it makes me feel good to know that if you have nowhere else to go, you'll come to me.
That's it, dude.
That's it, man.
Yeah.
But there was like the initial disappointment. It quickly went away because I was like, this is going to be cool. It's going to be fun. Because we don't get to hunt together that much anymore. We usually like are on a hunting trip together, but we split up, for each hunt, which is fine. That's cool too. I like getting to be the guy who's shooting a lot, where we used to like have to trade off a lot, But that quickly turned into like, all right, let's work through here and just kind of figure some things out. And this is a thing that I figured out on this trip more than I ever have before. Using a saddle on this trip was super helpful because I would have it with me and sometimes use it and sometimes not, and I didn't feel too bad about that. Whereas if I had a big old tree stand on my back, first off, walking through the thicket, it would be terrible. But having that Cruiser XC and a Seeker Mini platform, like, you just aren't that committed to it. You know?
Chad at Cruiser, one of his favorite sayings that I've heard at least him say several times is, it's a tool in the toolbox.
Yeah.
Right?
Uh-huh.
Hunt however is most effective for you. And to be honest, if you're able to hunt off the ground because you're not convicted about this 13-pound stand on your back, but more power to you, you know?
Yeah. And in fact, sometimes being able to hunt off the ground gives you an advantage because the deer are pressured to where the trees are. You know, the hangable trees. You know, if you're in an area that a climbing stand can go up any of the trees, well, they probably are taking them up those trees quite a bit. But sometimes a saddle will get you, you know, one stick high, and most people won't do that. Or you can just hunt on the ground with your stuff still in your pack, and that's what we did that evening. Actually, what we were doing is we were targeting these pinch points where like marshes would come close together, and there'd be like a little strip of land right there, and you could kind of cross that stuff. Sometimes it was muddy, but that would funnel the deer, right? It's like a classic pinch point. We cross one, and all of a sudden we start running into a deer sign right away on the other side, which is weird. I don't know if I think that's a telling thing as to the morning and evening movement. I'm trying to figure this out. So this is actually on the fly while we're on the podcast, but this thought just came to me. I think that in that spot, when those deer are using that pinch point, they are moving towards that side of it in the evenings. And they kind of hang up and they leave like staging area type sign right there. And that's why there was no sign on the other side of the pinch point, because as soon as they push through it, they are off to the races to go do whatever they do.
After dark or whatever.
Dark. Yes. But
closer to the human stuff, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So on the other side, where we were seeing the sign, I think that's where you see evening movement. So maybe that's something for us to keep in mind going forward.
And we actually quickly had an encounter.
We sure did.
To make a not great story, you know, pretty short, 2 bucks, you spot a buck as we're walking, and he's looking at us, and you hit a can call because you've used those your whole life, right?
No, I've got some inside information from a buddy there who says that the can call is the ticket. And
Which
I'm not,
in the South is a thing, you know what I mean?
It must be.
Can calls are,
I think they sound
thing.
silly.
I think they do too.
But
and guess what?
The deer don't.
We pulled out a can call, and this buck from about 150 comes walking straight to us.
After he'd seen us. He was eyeballing me at 150.
Dude, and he goes behind a tree, and we all hit the ground. There's 4 of us, okay? In the middle of kind of the open hardwoods. We hit the ground. Like I said, long story short, these 2 bucks come and just cannot stand it. But they eventually, before we can get a shot, they hit our wind.
Yes.
And go to blitzing
One of these
out
deer,
there.
so you and I
swirled weird too.
The wind was being weird right there. We had established before this hunt that your standards were a little lower than mine for this trip. You have a freezer that needs maybe a deer or 2 more in it. Yep. And I'm pretty good on meat. I actually have a couple there's a church that I know of that needs some meat for a Wednesday meal program they do. So that's kind of what I'm hunting for at the moment, is to kind of share some meat. You need a little bit more for your family. So you don't have as high standards as I do. And the buck that I see is probably not a deer that I want to shoot. So I just quickly go into caller mode, and you go into hunter mode, and it's kind of like the old days, really, except I don't have the camera. Well, I didn't really realize there was 2 bucks. And the buck that I see is not a deer I would shoot, but the buck that shows up first in our shooting lane is a pretty nice deer. He's like at the ears, 8 point, probably like a 3-year-old, and for me, that qualifies. Like, I was like, oh gosh, that's a nice buck. Well, he smells us. We're trying to like get the whole thing on film and all that.
It was crazy.
Yeah, it was a wild deal. But
it kind of started getting late on us after that.
Yes.
And we kind of just went to hunting on the ground, spread out through that pinch. And
Oh, well, funny enough, there ends up being 6 guys instead of 4.
That's exactly right.
So after this deer encounter,
it was like 5 or 10 minutes later.
Yeah, we look up, and yonder comes an Arkansan.
Actually, what we did was T. Jones went over to do his classic I Gotta Pee and found a tree over there And as soon as I got ready to pee, like got my pants unzipped, I look up and there's none other than Clay Newcomb walking through the woods at me.
Which is funny because if we were hunting in Arkansas without Clay Newcomb, we would probably end up calling like the public land guys out there, Clay Newcomb's running around. You know what I mean? Like, oh, there's Clay because we're in Arkansas.
Yep.
And sure enough, it was Clay and Michael, Spike as we call him, Spike Mike. And Clay's like, he's looking at us bewildered, like, what are y'all doing here?
In
Clay,
my spot.
this is my pen. And he's like, what do you mean? And we. I'm kind of. I don't mean to paint Clay in a bad light, but it was just funny. He got either mixed up on which pen he was going to, or I don't know. But we all ended up in the same place, and it was pretty funny. And we had a good time with it. But from there, we pretty much went about our boating business over the next few days, dealing with rain and stuff.
Yep.
And we didn't have any great encounters too much there that evening, so I went to do some map scouting. And I was trying to find places that weren't open hardwoods. It would seem that the deer were not too much in the open hardwoods. That was kind of the deal. And after that, we really couldn't figure much out. We were finding sign and not really finding deer. So that makes things tough because you're like, and not just like old rubs. When I say sign, I mean like fresh tracks that were laid down after the rain, which it was raining every 24 hours. So like it just got complicated. We zoned in on this other place that was a pretty long boat ride. We kind of map scouted it out, and yet again, Tyler Jones selflessly kind of goes with the third spot. Not because it was worse, but it was a little bit longer walk.
Yeah.
You were like, I'll do that.
It wasn't a terrible walk, though, but it was longer than the other two.
Well, you can end up getting a little bit, I don't want to say lazy, but like relative on this stuff. Like, it was longer than like the 200 yards I walked from the boat. But it still wasn't like a long public land walk.
Yeah.
But that ended up being all right.
Yeah, it did. So one of those cases where, like we talked about, getting a bunch of guys mobilized in the morning and going a long ways trailering your boat to hop in the boat, in the river and drive for quite a ways as well in the
navigating
dark.
the fog and the deadfall and floaters and all that stuff.
What ends up happening is essentially by the time we drop Clay and then KC and I get out at our spot, it's starting to get light, you know? And so I split up from KC after I took off 900 layers of jackets. I somehow ended up that morning with every jacket I brought on the trip in my bag, except for the big old giant, what's that thing called, the Chamberlain or whatever. It's a huge puffy, That's the only jacket I don't have in my bag. I got way too many clothes, and it's like 65, I think. So, but it's muggy, and it was cold on the boat ride, right?
Yeah.
Well, I had a bunch of jackets in my pack and on my body. And we had rain gear, so we get in there and like at your stand, you're like, just take some stuff off my stand because we got to make commotion anyway right there. So I start taking off jackets, and it takes me forever to get out of there. And finally, you're like about near on your mini seeker, and I take off with Eric in tow, and so it's wet, so we're gonna kind of walk slow and see what's ahead of us, but at not super slow, but at a decent pace, and try to kind of scout our way in there because it's getting daylight. We get several hundred yards from you and kind of starting to close in on the spot that we're going to. We're still maybe a couple hundred yards from where we had pinned, and we're walking in between a couple like sloughs or whatever. And I just like look over and something catches my eye, and it's a buck just like in a jog with his head down, and I'm like,
gummit.
I couldn't even tell it was a buck other than just body, stance and everything. So I just hit my knee immediately, and Eric does the same, and he's probably like a good 5, 6, 7 yards away from me or so behind me, and I said, "There's a buck," and so I like shed my backpack real quick, put my bow on the ground, and grab the can out, right, because it seemed to work before, and flip that can. And then I grab an arrow out of my quiver, knock it on, flip the rest up, and put it, upright. And when I look up, I see the deer at like 100 yards coming straight at us, dude. Just walking straight at us. And I'm like, no way, man. And so anyway, I tell Eric, he's coming at us. So he's coming at us for a second there, and he kind of goes behind a tree. You can't really see him. And next thing I know, he's kind of peeled off and going downwind, which the wind, again, the wind was not what it was supposed to be very often. I don't know how.
This is a thing.
It affect, like all the sloughs and everything somehow affect this. And in
river country, this is the thing. This is a thing anyways.
Yeah.
Like a large body of water will affect the wind in multiple ways. And one of the things with rivers is like you'll have these straightaways, and a wind will almost go off by half of a cardinal. And I don't mean, Eric, stop getting excited back there. When I say the word cardinal, I don't mean baseball, sir. I'm talking about like a direction.
This ain't a half of an Albert Pujols or nothing,
So half a yachty. Like if it's supposed to be a west, you can have a strong northwest and it'd be consistent.
We had a 180, both of us, one day off of what it was supposed to be. I mean, and so I think that this is another sentiment that people of the culture of that area tend to have when you talk to them, or people that have hunted that area, is they never talk about the wind. They never like regard the wind. They go in and hunt spots, and sometimes the wind works out for them, and sometimes it's kind of bad. But either way, in the end, those deer are very roaming throughout that stuff, and so you always kind of have a chance. You know what I mean?
So our buddy that we talked to that hunts there a lot, I try to get this out of him, and he told me, but then he's also kind of telling me other stuff too. He's like, yeah, man, you kind of want to blow your wind at the water. And then he's like, yeah, them deer in that water. And it's like, it's kind of like, okay, which one?
I'll tell you this. It's actually, if you can fully let go of that, something, like you got to have the wind blowing a certain direction, it's kind of refreshing. It's like, man, just go find a good-looking spot on the map and go hunt it, and it may turn out for you,
Yeah.
But it certainly didn't a whole lot for us on this trip, but I think that it would in the rut or something like that, right? Post-rut's a hard time, especially if you don't have, like, the classic Midwest, like, oh, we left some standing corn or whatever, a food destination.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that buck's coming at us, and he starts to peel off downwind to try to get our wind. And it's a nasty day, like I said, 65, kind of muggy, rainy, wet. Everything's wet. And I pull my rangefinder up, start ranging trees. Well, the first tree I hit, I can barely even see through my, like, it's dark. Not dark, but, like, it's not fully light, It's shooting light by probably 25 minutes. But it's a dark day.
Cloudy. And there's, like, storm clouds going over, like dark clouds too. So I can remember like it being like sunrise and kind of bright, and then like 10 minutes later getting darker. Yeah.
Well, my rangefinder lens is foggy too, and so I looked there. I find a tree in it, and I hit the range button, and I've got a red display. Dude, the whole thing turned red. I mean, because it radiates through the fog. You know what I mean? It's like if you just had a foggy windshield and hadn't put your defrost on, and then you let somebody shine their bright lights into you, coming at you on a 2-lane, can't see nothing. It just blinds you, right? And that's what happened. Well, I'm like, dadgum, I'm starting to freak out. I kind of wipe my lens a little bit, and I'm trying to range some stuff, and he's coming, and I can't move the whole time, because every time he comes out from a tree, he's looking. And so he finally sees us when he's probably about, 50, right? He sees me, and stands there for a second, and then thinks, that's not something. And so he just starts walking on, and he's looking around, trying to find this little fawn or whatever that just can call him. And he gets, I'm getting some ranges. I get a range on a tree that's at 25. Like, if it had been further than that, I don't know if I'd have been able to see it through my rangefinder, because the display stays lit up for a minute or whatever. So I would have to wait a minute for it to go off. Well, the deer's moving pretty fast. He's getting downwind, and I've got one more hole really that I can shoot him in. So I range a tree at 25, and I see him fixing to go behind another gigantor tree, and I'm like, I start to go, okay, if that's 25, then that tree back there, he's going to be, I go, he's probably 35, 36, maybe 37, somewhere in there. Just like 10 yards or a little more from that tree is what I guessed. Well, it's still kind of dark and foggy, so hard to see, right? So I get, basically he goes behind the tree, and I draw back, and he comes into my window, and I got to shoot over this bent over tree, basically, this little one, little sapling. I got to shoot under it off the ground. So I draw back. He comes out from the tree, and I grunt stop him perfect right in the hole of that bent tree. And I'm thinking he's amped up. He's already kind of seen something. He's been called to. This deer is at 35, 36. He's in prime string jumping territory right here, right?
Yeah.
So I put my 30 like about chest line, bottom of his chest, right? And pull the trigger, and it goes way low, dude. And I was so disappointed. Well, he kind of runs off and he blew once, and I was like, daggone it. Well, maybe he's amped up enough that I can hit him again with a call. Call to him again. He doesn't come back. I'm kind of talking to the camera, and I turn back around, and I'm kind of just sitting there looking, and it's been like a minute or two, and all of a sudden there is another buck, and he's closer to my wind at about 50, working towards our wind again, and he's even bigger than the one I just shot at as far as like maturity and overall rack, really. Like he may not have had as many tines. I think he was a 7-point. And the one I shot at was a 9, maybe 10. But he's just a different deer for sure. Thick body. And he goes, long story short, basically starts getting close to my wind, so I'm starting to hit him with that can a bunch at like 50, and I'm kind of a little bit gun shy because I don't know the whole Ranger thing. Just like I kind of didn't feel good after that, after missing him and having the rangefinder just blind me and all this stuff. So I didn't try to whip one out there at 50 at him or nothing, and I didn't have a whole lot of opportunities with all the brush. But I was using that call a bunch, and he wanted to come so bad, dude.
Even after you smelled you?
Oh, dude, even after he smelled me, like I saw him smell us, and I was like, for sure he smelled us. So I hit him again, and he starts like freaking out and like taking little jogging steps and doing circles and trying to like come back to us, and then he finally went into the brush after a minute.
Do you think that those deer are less sensitive to human scent because there's so many duck hunters in the woods that never shoot them?
That's a interesting thought, for sure. It's an interesting thought. Potentially, yeah.
Because the evening before, we kind of had the same thing go on where, deer smelled us, but they still wanted to be there.
Yeah, I don't know.
That might be 2 or 3 evenings. I don't know.
Who knows?
The first bucket kind of
Yeah. So, I don't know. Maybe that. I mean, it definitely. They were wanting the call, so either they were real ruddy or they are less sensitive for some reason.
Yeah.
But he ended up being wise enough to make his move and get out of there. So anyway, I go and I figure out real quick that I'm pretty sure that the range was off, and that I projected for that range on that deer.
Yeah.
And anyway, we do a loop after that. We set up right there because it's like, we saw bucks here. There's something going on. I'll shoot a doe if it comes by. We set up. We sat for probably 2 hours, and then got down and I did a big loop. And on the way back, I went to where that deer peeled out and took off. You could see, and I ranged the closest big tree to me, and then went over and found where I was sitting on my knees in the dirt, and it was like 4 yards. It was anywhere from 9 to 12 foot probably, so 3 or 4 yards, right, which would have put me at 41 from that spot. And so what I ended up doing was shooting a 30-yard pin at a 41-yard deer and putting it on his brisket.
And he didn't move,
low,
right?
And he didn't. We reviewed the footage. He did not jump the string one bit, dude.
What's up with these southern jumpy deer,
I know, dude. I think he legit just thought there was a deer there, and he was super relaxed.
And 41 is kind of out of the range of that jumpy spot.
Yeah, that's right. It's further. So it's a little less explosion.
Yeah, like the margins around 30 yards is the jumpiest spot on a deer. Like they're far enough away that they have time to get out of the way, but they are still close enough to hear the bow go off.
Yeah, and be like, that's real loud.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Where at 41, it's like, that 10 yards makes a pretty good difference.
Yeah.
So
anyway,
sorry you had to miss.
Nah, I know it was a little weird, because I haven't had quite the year that I wanted to, I guess.
Yeah.
But I have shot some nice bucks, two nice bucks, but I had the South Dakota deal, and I think I talked about everybody about the Oklahoma thing on the podcast as well. And those are two that have just been haunting me a little bit. And then, this deal, and I've made good shots. The South Dakota deal was for sure on me. It was 100%.
Does the podcast audience know about some reasoning behind the Oklahoma miss?
I don't think I've talked about actually what happened since then.
Yeah.
We talked about how it was just low.
Yeah.
But it left and right, it felt good.
Yeah,
so
give them a little insight.
Yeah, I took my bow to the bow shop before we left on this Arkansas trip, and my bow tech, Brett, who's a good dude, man, and really knowledgeable about this stuff. He gets my bow once he gets off of whatever he's working on, and immediately just my bow disappears, and I'm just talking with people, and I'm like, and I looking back, I'm like, Brett had like a mini like, holy smokes, this is bad thing, and I didn't even know it at the time. He just kind of kept it quiet and started working on it. And I go back in there after he's been working on it for probably 15 minutes, and he's like, dude, your bow was 3/8 out, and it was pulling 67 instead of 71. And I was like, you got to be kidding me, dude.
Yeah. And for those of you who don't know, you probably do. But what that means is Tyler was not shooting his arrow at the velocity or trajectory in which he thought he was.
Yeah. So FPS per pound, how much is that? Like 5?
I believe
or 3.
It's gonna depend on the bow, but 3 to 5 is probably pretty good.
So if you say 3 on the bottom end, 4 pounds, that's 12 foot per second slower. 5, it's 20, right?
Sure.
I mean, that's making your 282 foot per second arrow go 260 or less. Yeah, or no, sorry, 265 or less, So at 48 yards, 47 yards, that's a difference, you know what I mean?
Yep.
And I mean, it hurts. It hurts.
Yeah.
And but that's the nature of the beast, what
That's
we do,
archery.
man. We go hard where we go, and we don't always have as much time as we'd like to go back to the bow shop and make sure everything's shooting through paper good,
Nobody does, though, dude.
No, they don't. That's
unless
right.
you are just that guy. And some people are. Shouldn't
Or
say
you're
nobody.
close to a real good shop, maybe.
But it's not practical to go to the bow shop every week.
No, it's not.
And it's not practical to put your bow on a press every week or to check your poundage or whatever. It's a thing that happens. It's not anything against a bow either.
No, dude, I'm telling you, we put our stuff through some rough
man.
conditions.
We do, and that's why it's impressive that they hold up as good as they do.
That's
sometimes,
right.
to tell you the truth.
That's right.
But
yeah, so that's the bow's shooting good now, and the miss there, it's on me because I misjudged the distance, but there's some pretty good excuses I think I have there.
Yeah.
That may, at least for me, you may be thinking I'm a clown, so that's fine. But I look at it and I justify it as like, you know what? I felt confident. I thought I had judged it correctly, but that's the way bow hunting goes.
We had a good talk about this kind of stuff with Clay, and Clay, I think his line was, "You got to shoot to kill."
Yeah. And
he said he grew up with a different mentality of like, you just shoot them 20 yards and in, and you're absolutely sure of the shot. And I'm not saying by any means that you shouldn't be sure of your shot, but I think that all three of us are pretty much in agreement that you're gambling when you're using archery equipment in general.
Yeah.
Like, it's just the way archery hunting goes. And these wildlife departments understand that archery is less lethal than a gun. That is how it is. Now, somebody out there's yelling because actually arrows are more lethal than bullets. But if all things considered, you throw the shot into the mix, right? Then they have a lower lethality.
Yeah.
And so, they figure that in for that. And you know what? Nothing's wasted in the world. Them coyotes and maggots, all that stuff's got to have something to eat, right?
Yeah.
So it's going to be fine, guys.
That's
you know
right,
what? We
man.
don't worship these animals. That we like them a whole lot.
They're awesome.
They're awesome. I respect them as one of God's creations, but I'm not here to just ruin my life because I miss a deer or happen to maybe nick one or something on accident.
And dude, trying hard to be a good shot
Absolutely.
is something you do.
Absolutely.
And so it's when you don't make the good shot, it's a little disappointing, but it's also you get over it because you know that you haven't. There's not a whole lot more you could do, right? Yeah. There's always another rep. You know, if you got that mentality, if you grew up in sports, it's always another rep you can do before you die. You know,
if you take 2 inches short of the line, that's a state championship loss. You know, or whatever. And I get that. I do
too. But
like
you've worked hard at it.
There's a difference in knowing your confidence level and understanding your limitations and just not knowing what you can or cannot perform and do. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, if you're a guy who hasn't practiced much and you don't really know how good you're shooting, man, maybe work on that. But, like, if you know exactly where you're dialed at and you draw your bow back and you feel good about the shot, take the shot, man.
Dude. That's
if
what we're out there to do.
If you feel good about it, don't, why would you not?
I love watching birds, but dadgummit, there ain't nothing better than blacking out when you pull the trigger on a deer. You know what I mean? That's the best feeling in the world, dude. Golly. I love that, dude.
Yeah.
But anyway, so, yes, that happened. We got some cool footage. Eric got some cool footage of those bucks.
They're swampy looking, too,
They are.
man.
They look like
awesome.
some dadgum Arkansas bucks,
yes,
you know?
Sir.
Like, as soon as you hit the Red River, man, things change, you know?
Yes.
And anyway, we basically from there continued on with kind of what was happening before that, where we just struggled. And we did everything. We hunted all over the place. I mean, a big swath of country, big part of the state, you know, just trying to, like, figure out, is there a different habitat we can be in? Is there a different, should we be on hills or should we be in the bottoms? Or, you know, how
different
does this all work out?
Activity. Like,
that's right.
You know, Arkansas is one of those places that has a Picasso of rut dates. So you can... That ain't never good when you see a truck on the side of the road and the tire sitting sideways, the whole wheel. So sorry for that guy. This sign, by the way, this sign has been laid over for 10 years and they will not fix it. I don't know what their problem is.
It's got vines growing on it.
It does, dude.
Anyway, so yes, it was. The trip was overall. We were trying different things, trying to make something happen, and we were struggling. And we were hunting out far from camp. We had the camp was awesome, but it was definitely a tiring thing to go and hunt out far from this stuff. But we were going to try hard because that's just kind of what we do. And so we struggled to have deer encounters, but you did see what you thought might have been a boar at one part.
I did.
Clay kind of
almost shot a hog, and then I realized that it wasn't. So I was being cautious. I wasn't drawing back on an animal that I was unsure of. But Greg and I were stalking in on this place that we were going to hang, but we were getting there kind of late, so we were being real quiet and cautious. And I look over at 40 yards, and there's a black thing chowing down on acorns. I'm like, oh, my gosh, that's a pig. And then I got to look at it, and the ears didn't look right, and it ended up being a bear. I saw a black bear at 40 yards just eating acorns, not a care in the world, man.
So
and
cool.
It looked at us and didn't care. It was so cool, man. And we got to talk to Clay quite a bit about this. Clay's very knowledgeable about stuff, and I might have mentioned this already, but like apparently Arkansas, the black bears in Arkansas were extirpated except for a certain area. And this bear would have had that gene. This is not a imported bear. This is a native Arkansas bear, which is pretty cool to me, man.
That is cool, man.
So, and it had a real black face, it looked like a swamp bear.
Yeah, it did.
It was neat. That made the trip for me for sure.
Dude,
I've seen bears in the Rockies, been close to them, but man, this bear, me and this bear are alike. You know what I mean? Like, from the South, we've sweated and dealt with the mosquitoes and stuff,
Yeah, dude.
It was cool.
I tend to live through you and your experiences when we're on the same hunt, and the bear kind of made the trip for me too.
That's cool.
And I didn't even see it, you know. But the footage that Greg got is pretty immaculate.
Yeah.
I mean, it is cool.
So this
footage.
bear is just chowing on acorns. I guess it's being loud in its head, kind of like you're eating a granola bar. But it's also real wet. So our steps are real quiet, and Greg sneaks up to about 30 yards, and I give this bear a few squeaks, hoping that maybe it'll come our way. Well, it doesn't come our way, but at least kind of looks at us. So it's primo, man. It's very neat looking.
It is cool. But
so that was actually probably the highlight of my trip. I struggle on this trip to have good deer encounters. I got a little enamored with some places and some sign, and I was really trying to figure things out. And man, quite honestly, if you're trying completely new areas every hunt, you can figure out some things, but you can also strike out a lot too.
Sure
so
enough.
like about halfway through the trip, I decided to dedicate myself to like I don't know, 60-acre area, you know, trying to figure that out. And I might have figured out some things, but I still didn't see many deer.
Yeah.
And then on the last day, we kind of got a little bit wild, you could say. Just
we did.
read some, you know, the boat is already what you might call creative access, but we decided to get like pretty super creative with our access that day.
Things got Western, man.
Yeah.
So what we decided was Clay was not going to go boating that morning. And so I was trying to decide what to do. I hit the hay early that night before, so I didn't really get in on any of the planning. So I woke up and asked KC, what are you doing? He told me where he's going. And I was like, man, we're kind of running late that morning. We're getting tired in the trip, you know, and just not making, you know, not moving fast. And so it's getting late, and, you know, it's probably like 4:45, and I got to figure something out. And I'm thinking, man, if KC, like where I really want to go, I can get in by walking, but it's going to be a mile at least walk, which is pretty hard considering this terrain. And then I'm also going to have hip waders to get in there because it's rained a bunch. And we've got hip waders, and I'm pretty like, man, this is going to be something, you know, I have to be all in on. I'm trying to decide, but I don't want KC. Basically, if he takes me in the boat, he's got to go the exact opposite way of the way he's going, and he is not going to get in there till late. And so I hop in the truck, and I kind of got this idea, and I'm trying to run him through it, and I'm like, all right, I'm going to walk in, but can you pick me up? Because that'll make this a lot nicer if you can, you know, because it's like a 500-yard walk out, depending on where I actually set up. So Eric and I go, and we walk in from you know, road access or whatever, and we have to cross like 2 or 3 like major slough/creek systems that are flowing pretty good. That are, I mean, one of them came within probably 3 inches of our top of our waders or so on the hip waders, but we made it across, and we get back in here. And this is the thing, I struggled a lot like KC last year. I struggled this year too, but like, I mean, I had a tough hunt last year too, but this was one of the better spots I found last year that we hunted. And I was like, I just want to give it a try, you know. I saw deer in there, so we're struggling to see deer right now. We go in there, we walk a mile in. Of course, we're late getting in there because overall everybody's late that morning. And we're walking in hip boots for a mile, you know. And we get in there, we get to the spot that I hung, and I was like, yeah, it's pretty good, but I kind of really want to see this stuff up, you know, a little bit further up this way. So we continue on in. And we kind of are working our way through this country, and I kind of come around a deadfall, and I see a ginormous scrape, like on a just scrape tree if you've ever seen it. And the scrape is really not like opened up in a ginormous fashion, but it's muddy, so there are like tracks in like a 5-yard diameter, and like stomped in the mud. I can see it clear as day in the leaves, you know, when I come around from like 20, 30 yards away. And I was like, there's a scrape right there. It's like, I walk over to it, and I'm like thinking, man, it's kind of open up right here. You know, like, I'm just going to try to get a shot in here and make this happen. It's getting pretty light, you know, sun's going to come up pretty quick. I mean, it's already light, but the sun's going to actually come above the horizon pretty quick. And so we try to make a tree work for forever, and we're looking, cannot make it work. I got poison ivy a couple weeks ago on the public land Texas hunt and stuff that we did. Me and Michael both got it. Michael got it worse than me. And so I was like, I don't really want to hang in this poison ivy tree that's pretty much perfect for us. So we get on the ground, me and Eric do, and we're sitting on, basically leaned up against 2 trees on the ground, just straight up Arkansas hillbilly style, you know. And he's got pretty good cover. I'm pretty wide open. But we're both in the shadows, and the sun's kind of behind us, you know, and we're sitting, you know, blowing our wind to where, I mean, it's open and I can't see any deer for a long ways. And I'm like, this is good setup. We'll have something cruise by. Wind is blowing into this thick stuff, and deer are going to cruise up and down this thing trying to win does potentially. Well,
Windows.
That's it. Trying to smell does. And
window, you mean?
Yeah. So everybody's got a doe story, right?
Yeah.
So I'm going to not make this last a whole lot longer.
If y'all don't know, so you might be new to us from a meat eater audience or something.
Yeah.
We appreciate y'all being here. This is how the Element Podcast goes. It's a lot of storytelling and a lot of fun. We laugh a lot, and we have inside jokes. And the more you listen, the more you're going to be in on the jokes.
Yeah.
There's this funny meme that Tyler likes to talk about where there's like this delivery truck that maybe like is a bread truck or something. And there's like two ladies kind of laughing on the side of the truck. And then there's this real dude standing here laughing too. And the caption reads, "Me listening to my favorite podcasters." That guy can be you if you listen
That's
a lot.
right.
So,
you can be laughing too.
That's an inside joke. Where Tyler coined this phrase whenever I went and hunted elk in Arizona, and I shot a cow and was telling the big long story of the cow. And then Tyler's like, everybody's got a doe story, man. So, and it's a metaphor, as our buddy Clay likes to talk about, for how sometimes your hunting story might be more interesting to you than it is to other people. But Tyler, this one is interesting to me.
Yeah,
so tell me more about it.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So anyway, we were sitting there for a while and just chilling, and I kind of look over. I don't know if I heard something or what. Sometimes I think that I either hear or actually see something out of periphery or something, and I don't really realize that something clued me into those deer. I just feel like I'm just scanning, but maybe something actually did clue me in, and I don't ever realize it. Anyway, long story short, I look over in this gap, and like probably at 80 yards or so, maybe a little bit further, 100 yards, there are a bunch of deer moving through the timber. I can't really see how many or what, but they're moving fast, like maybe getting chased by a buck. And I'm like, there's deer. And he's like seven yards behind me, so he can't really hear me great. I say it loud enough, he hears me. He gets the camera kind of rolling, and these deer are getting closer. And I'm like, oh, man. So I put my bow up on my knee, on my leg, and kind of get it vertical and start ranging some trees to make sure. And basically, again, long story short, these does come in, kind of see me. There's 4 of them, and they're coming towards us, man. They get to like 40, they start seeing us. The lead one sees us, and the other 3 they should be able to see us, and they're looking at where that deer's looking, but they just like don't take it serious. You know what I mean? For some reason, they do that a lot. Well, the lead doe finally breaks through her fear, and she comes. I had finally ranged a tree at like 30, and I knew maybe it was 32. I think is what I ranged it at, and she comes kind of like south of that a little bit, and I'm looking at her, I'm like, she's got to be right there at 30, 32, 34, something like that. She's within a short window there, which is prime string jumping distance, right? Mm-hmm. And she's pretty amped up. And they're all kind of all being weird. The 3 are kind of standing back for a second. And she goes behind these 2 trees that are small, but they're like so close together, stacked, that they make kind of a little wall, and she puts her head is right behind them, and then she just kind of looks the other way, and I'm like, what? She's seriously doing this? She's trying to trick me, and then she kind of looks like ahead. She's broadside. She's looking straight ahead, and I can see her head kind of move through the crack in those 2 trees. Well, I'm like, man, it's kind of now or never, I feel like. So I go ahead and draw back, and when I do, I know what's fixing to happen because there's 3 other ones looking at me, right? Mm-hmm. But this is the chance, because otherwise they're all going to be looking at us, the whole time anyway. So I pull back, draw back. They freak out. Of course, I have to stick my bow into the sun out of the shadow, and I draw back. The 3 just go nuts, start blowing and running, and the one that I was going to shoot is she takes like 2 quick steps, like, oh, what's going on? And then she stops to see what's going on. Her head and the majority of her shoulder is behind this gigantic oak, and I can just barely see the crease.
A joke?
A joke, that's right. Mm-hmm. And I can barely see the crease. And so I'm like, all right, I'm going to give myself a tiny bit of margin there and just put it, behind the crease a little bit. And I also put my 30 again on her breastbone, essentially.
Man,
right?
let me tell you something, Tyler. You do a lot of aiming that is outside of the standard. This deer is at 30 yards, so I'm going to use my 30-yard pin.
Yeah.
You do a lot of that.
Yeah.
That's and it's good.
It's premeditated.
It's a good thing to think about and do, but it's just it's strange in the right word. It's interesting to me how often you are thinking about stuff like that.
A lot of that is, like I said, premeditated. So I think about, do I have 27 to 40-yard shot, and if I do, what should I do? And then things kind of happen quick, and sometimes you make the wrong decision.
Yeah.
But anyway, I put it like on her sternum, low, the 30, and pull the trigger, and it goes good. And
she did, in fact, jump the string.
She did, in fact, jump the string quite a bit, actually, it appears, because it hit above the midline. But if you know much, you know that the high back lung is deadly. And when I gutted her, the lungs were completely had a hole through, like it wasn't a fringe shot. It was through the lungs.
Yeah.
And she literally ran into the thickest brush 10 yards away, and I was pretty sure I heard her crash, and I was like, oh, that was awesome. She literally, I shot her probably at 32 or so. She probably ran less than that. I mean, it was like over faster than you could imagine. And I guess the rest is kind of just cool stuff you'll see on video where, I drag her 500 yards with guts in because I'm going through swamps and stuff to get to where we're meeting KC. And we had to pre-plan all this because we didn't have service. So I was like, all right, here's 2 pins. If I can't get to this one, there's our backup pin. I'll meet you there.
I'm looking for toilet paper in a tree because we have this system of if he sees toilet paper, I need to do this, that, and the other.
Yeah. and then there's also this whole thing where if it's noon and I'm not there, go to the truck. And that's where
I
we're
was
going.
worried about that because we actually man, I never time things out right. I'm always 5 minutes late. But I was on the dot 11:30.
You were, dude. You were.
And there was a lot of moving parts to make 11:30 happen.
Yeah.
I was surprised.
I bet.
And we drove past both the pins, and you weren't at either of them. Like, dadgummit, where's he at?
Dude, we were trying hard. We saw you. And then so I saw y'all go up past us, and I was like, man, I think I can cross this slough potentially and get a little bit further out on the point because it was all flooded back in there. You're having to look through the woods,
Yeah.
And so I cross this slough and I get out there and y'all are coming back down. I'm like, they're going to miss us. And I'm running out there trying to wave my arms. And I had had the saddle with me because it's kind of silverish, gray. It's the only solid I had. And so I'm trying to wave that and Greg sees me. So yeah, I had gutted the deer down, by the river there so that I could not get her muddy, the meat muddy or whatever. But anyway, kind of got her taken care of and put in the boat and
that was cool,
back,
man.
which is something I've kind of wanted to do. It's a dream,
A deer in the boat is just awesome.
Yep.
And congrats on that, man.
Thanks,
it's a big feat. It's probably kind of a common thing thrown around is any deer on public land is a big deal. I mean, I try to not get too caught up with the public land deal. Any deer is cool, no matter what, but this was a hard hunt, and I think that's the bigger thing than a public land deer. It was difficult, and it was awesome that you were actually able to kill a deer on this trip because outside of the time I was kind of the caller for you, I really had no deer in range that I could shoot.
It's tough,
dude.
it
was real tough. So big congratulations on that,
Thanks,
man.
Dude.
And after that, pretty much the story wraps. We do one more hunt, and nobody really sees anything. But the bigger story to all this is just how much fun camp was.
It was and the hunt was an adventure in itself. And then, camp was awesome.
Yes, and I cannot wait to go back and do that again because it is a lot of fun. And, man, if you don't have good, enjoyable people to hunt with, you are missing out on something. I understand being alone, too. That's actually really nice sometimes as well. I'm only child, like I've said, so, I enjoy my alone time. But being able to reflect on things with other people, bounce ideas off of people, and also share some beliefs and talk about some things openly and passionately, and also challenge one another is a good thing to have. hey, why did you do that in the woods? Or, hey, what do you think about this scripture? Or whatever it is, man. Having people that you can talk about that kind of stuff with means a lot. And that's one of the things I enjoyed the most out of this trip.
Me too, man. It was great. Well, we're going to get old Clay on the podcast one of these days and maybe do some other hunting with him. We've already talked about it. We've already started planning some stuff. And we're seeing lots of deer right now. Do we have to stop in here?
No, the stuff's at my house, I believe.
But, yeah, there's some deer around home, so maybe there's still some deer hunting to do. I know we've got one more trip that'll happen at some point, and we're probably going to see our friend Mark Kenyon at some point.
I imagine so. You might all hear from old Mark Kenyon on there. So I hope that y'all have a very Merry Christmas. I think this episode should release sometime right before.
Yeah, we may get one more in before. I don't know.
Well, who knows, guys?
Who knows?
But if you have a tag, it's still deer season where you are. So get out there and get after it. Remember to work hard, and remember, this is your element.
Live in it.
As you know, the Meat Eater Live Tour is on April 23rd through May 5th. Chances are in a town near you. What you may not know is you can win tickets to each of these events just by going to a backcountry hunters and anglers pint night. There's going to be a pint night in each of these towns: San Diego, Salt Lake City, Tempe, Anaheim, Boise, Sacramento, Missoula, Portland, Tacoma, where you can compete in Meat Eater trivia and win not only tickets to the show, but a chance to be on stage with all of us. So get your butt to a pint night, and we'll see you on stage.